Run a small breakfast diner for 6 years in Rockford, Michigan, and you learn the fundamental, unwritten law of hospitality. There is a profound, structural difference between a customer and a critic. Customers eat because they are hungry for food and comfort. Critics evaluate because they are hungry for superiority and control. Critics do not tip, and they rarely say thank you. I bought the Blue Door Diner in 2019 at 31 years old from the retired veteran I had waitressed for since I was 19, and I have flipped eggs over a 400-degree griddle at 4:30 every single morning since. That kind of relentless physical labor teaches you something essential about feeding people who take your presence for granted. It is fine. The griddle does not require applause, and at 38 years old, neither do I. But there is a massive, soul-crushing difference between a stranger who forgets to say thank you at the register and a family that has engineered an entire generational operating system out of withholding appreciation. I grew up inside that exact operating system. In my mother Rose Whitfield's world, every family gathering was structured like a corporate organizational chart. There was the primary table, crafted from polished mahogany with heavy linen napkins. And there was the lesser, card table annex, set up in the den with mismatched folding chairs. There was a rigid hierarchy, determining who hosted, who brought the approved casseroles, who earned an invitation to the after-party in the sunroom, and who only found out about the sunroom weeks later through social media photographs. My mother ran our family with the cold, ruthless precision of an aristocrat presiding over an exclusive guest list. For 25 years, I was not treated as a daughter. I was the uncredited catering staff. I cooked the Easter hams, hosted the bridal showers, and managed Thanksgiving dinners, whether her kitchen was undergoing an extensive remodel or not. Nobody ever asked me if I wanted to host. Asking would have required acknowledging my labor. My older brother Paul would show up with a $10 bottle of wine and receive a grand celebratory toast. I would arrive with 3 days of prep work in cooler bags and immediately be asked where the serving spoons were kept. I am not sharing this painful personal history so you will feel sorry for a 38-year-old diner owner who works long hours. I am sharing it because you must understand the toxic generational machine my 17-year-old daughter was born into. In my family's unwritten ledger, I was never the favored child, nor was I ever the overt rebel who caused scenes. I was simply the designated caterer. The most heartbreaking part of this unvarnished reality is that it took my own daughter's 17th year on this earth for me to finally notice the invisible apron I had never taken off since childhood. My daughter, Lily, is a high school senior, and she is the rare, precious kind of human being who shows love strictly with her hands. She does not make grand, performative speeches or post emotional tributes online for attention. Instead, she silently fixes your wobbly kitchen chair, charges your phone before you even notice the battery is dying, and stands right beside me on the diner's Saturday morning rush line, holding tongs like she was born for line work. She has worked weekend shifts since she was 15, earning official payroll wages, because I refuse to run my household the way my mother managed hers. When Grandma Rose's 70th birthday appeared on the calendar, Lily did not merely buy a generic Hallmark card. She designed an architectural menu. She spent 2 full weeks texting 23 relatives individually, asking a single thoughtful question. What is the one dish from a family dinner that made you feel truly happy? She collected their answers like precious evidence. Aunt Janet requested chicken and dumplings. My cousin's young children voted unanimously for baked macaroni and cheese with the golden breadcrumb crust. For my mother, Lily did not need to ask. Rose had spent 30 years lamenting her late grandmother's peach cobbler, a legendary recipe no family member had successfully replicated since her passing. Lily hunted down an authentic vintage version online, refining the recipe through 4 grueling test batches until our kitchen smelled like a county fair. Lily financed the entire 23-person birthday dinner completely out of her personal savings. $340 accumulated from hard-earned diner tips and weekend babysitting cash. When I tried to secretly slide my credit card into her purse at the grocery store checkout counter, she firmly pushed my hand away and smiled warmly. "It's my gift to Grandma, Mom. Gifts count more when they cost you something." She was only 17 years old. She spent 3 long evenings hand-lettering 23 individual place cards using intricate calligraphy techniques she had taught herself from instructional videos. The primary card, written for my mother, read Grandma Rose across the front, framed by an elaborate gold foil border that Lily painstakingly drafted twice to ensure every line was perfectly straight. I watched her tape her handwritten master timeline to the refrigerator door, and I felt a profound swell of maternal pride, thinking, this is the absolute best of us, distilled into one beautiful evening. I had no idea I was watching my daughter prepare for a test my mother was already planning to fail. I want to be completely transparent. I did not walk my child into an emotional ambush blindly. I know my mother intimately. So 3 weeks prior to the event, I pinned down the arrangement in writing. I texted Rose, "Birthday dinner at our house, Saturday the 14th at 6 p.m. Lily is cooking the entire meal for you." My mother replied with a single word. "Fine." Not lovely, not thank you, just fine. Having hosted decades of her events, I knew fine was a yellow caution light. So a week before the party, at Sunday lunch, I asked out loud in front of witnesses, "Mom, Saturday at our house, Lily's dinner. You're certain?" She dismissed the question with a casual wave of her hand and said, "Yes, of course, your house." But then she turned to Sandra, her friend from the country club, and added a sentence I should have taken far more seriously. "Dana's place is cozy, homely, simple." In my mother's dictionary, cozy is not a compliment. Cozy is a basement floor she believes she is above. On the Saturday of the party, Lily was awake before I was, and at 38 years old, I flip eggs for a living at 4:30 every single morning. By 7 o'clock, my daughter had our kitchen organized like a seasoned Michelin line cook preparing for a major dinner service. Cook stations were neatly demarcated with blue painter's tape, sheet pans borrowed from the diner were stacked by dimensions, and a handwritten master schedule was taped to the cabinet, every single dish scheduled backward from 6 o'clock sharp. There was chicken and dumplings for Aunt Janet, double batches of baked mac and cheese with the crust because the young cousins were attending, green beans prepared the exact way my late father loved them because Lily wanted his spirit at the table, and scratch-made yeast rolls. And finally, the cobbler, the famous peach cobbler, timed to come out piping hot at 6:15 so the whole house would fill with the fragrant aroma of Rose's childhood memories just as the birthday candles were lit. My husband, Mark, ran errands with fierce dedication, fetching extra bags of ice, folding chairs, and specialized baking butter. Around 3 in the afternoon, Lily washed her hands, untied her stained apron, and sat at the dining table to finish the place cards. 23 cards were fanned out in neat rows, her calligraphy growing more confident with each name. At 4 o'clock, she stood in the kitchen doorway, surveying 9 hours of meticulous labor, 6 completed dishes, a beautifully set table, and a home that smelled of 3 generations. She allowed herself one soft, proud smile. At precisely 4:15, my phone lit up on the kitchen counter. I remember the exact time because the oven timer read 1:45 on the cobbler, and I remember thinking before picking it up, it's her birthday. Surely not even my mother. The notification was a group text sent to all 23 guests, delivered 45 seconds before the private message she sent to me. That detail still speaks volumes about the order of operations in my mother's heart. The group text read, "Change of plans, everyone. Sandra has generously booked the private dining room at Antonelli's as my birthday gift. We are eating at the restaurant tonight at 7 p.m., adults only, please. It is a lovely room. See you there." And then her private message to me read, "You can bring the cobbler if you want. Adults only." I stood in my kitchen and read those words 3 times, like a lab result that couldn't possibly be correct. Antonelli's at 7. Adults only, with an exclamation mark of artificial warmth. My daughter was upstairs changing into the new dress she had bought specifically for tonight. On my stove sat 6 finished dishes for 23 people. On my dining table lay 23 hand-lettered cards, and the one at the head of the table had a gold border done twice. I called my mother immediately. It went straight to voicemail because she was at her hair salon. I texted, "Mom, Lily cooked all day. Everything is ready. Please call me." Her reply came 9 minutes later. "Don't make this difficult, Dana. Sandra went to a great deal of trouble. A restaurant is simply more appropriate for the occasion. Adults only." I turned my phone face down and walked into the kitchen doorway to figure out how to break my daughter's heart. But I didn't have to say a word. Lily was already standing at the counter in her new dress, holding her phone. She had read the group chat. I watched my 17-year-old daughter read the message again. Then she set her phone down, picked up the sugar shaker, finished dusting the top of the cobbler, and said in a voice so level it broke me completely, "It's okay, Mom. I'm used to it." Standing in that kitchen doorway, watching my 17-year-old daughter file her own heart under normal, something fundamentally broke inside me. For 17 years, I had knelt down to Lily's eye level every time my mother disappointed her, offering gentle, diplomatic translations. "Grandma loves you in her own way, sweetie. She's just from a different generation." Standing there, smelling 9 hours of my daughter's selfless devotion drifting out of the oven, I finally conducted a brutal self-audit that I should have done a decade ago. I wasn't building a bridge between my daughter and my mother. I was teaching my child how to become an obedient doormat. I was the certified master instructor in our family's toxic curriculum, patiently training Lily to accept her lower rank with a polite, agreeable smile. Every soft excuse I had ever uttered was just a tuition payment to an abusive school I should have pulled us both out of years ago. The realization hit me less like a gentle light bulb and more like a fever breaking. My mother built the ranking system, yes, but I was the one who had spent 25 years teaching my daughter to quietly accept her place below the salt. While my heart was breaking, my practical instincts as a diner owner kicked in. I picked up my phone to examine the digital paper trail, and that was when I discovered the first massive crack in my mother's carefully constructed narrative. Sandra hadn't spontaneously booked the private dining room at Antonelli's at 4 o'clock on a Saturday afternoon as a surprise gift. Anyone who knows luxury dining in Michigan knows that high-end Italian restaurants require a substantial deposit and weeks of advance notice for a private room on a weekend. I opened my mother's shared iPad account, which was still linked to my family cloud drive from when I set up her digital photos, and found the confirmation email buried in her trash folder. Rose had personally booked and paid an $800 non-refundable deposit for Antonelli's private room 16 days ago using her own credit card. Sandra was merely the respectable cover story. My mother had never intended to step foot in my house. She had found my home cozy and homely, words she used to describe anything beneath her country club aspirations. And she had engineered this public restaurant pivot weeks in advance, hiding behind her friend's generosity so she could play the innocent guest of honor while erasing my daughter's hard work. With the deposit receipt glowing on my screen, I made one final, good faith attempt to offer my mother an exit before the situation deteriorated beyond repair. I called her salon again, and this time she answered on the first ring, her tone dripping with the smooth, triumph-tinged victory of a woman who believed she had successfully backed her daughter into a corner. Before she could launch into her pre-packaged lecture about being dramatic, I offered her two completely reasonable, dignified compromises. "Mom," I said, keeping my voice as calm and level as a stainless steel counter. "Lily made 6 dishes from scratch with $340 of her own money. Here's what we can do. We bring the food to Antonelli's and serve it family style in the private room so Sandra's gift still counts and your granddaughter gets to present hers. Or we move the restaurant dinner to Sunday lunch and keep tonight at our house as planned. You pick one and I will personally make it happen." There was a heavy, expensive silence on the line before my mother's voice came back, cold as fine china. "Antonelli's is an elite establishment, Dana, not a church basement potluck. I am certainly not turning a private dining room into a buffet, nor am I rearranging my 70th birthday around a teenager's little weekend project." A project. 9 hours of intense labor, $340 of babysitting cash, 4 test batches of her own late grandmother's cobbler, reduced to a teenager's project. My mother continued, her tone gathering warmth the way frost does across glass. "Honestly, this is why your brother Paul handles social occasions so much better than you. Everything with you becomes a tense negotiation. The room seats 12 people, Dana. It's elegant, it's adults only, and it starts at 7. Wear the navy blue dress. It's slimming." She hung up before I could reply. I stood in my pantry, among the canned plum tomatoes and backup paper towels, holding the warm phone against my ear, noting with strange, professional clarity the exact shape of the door that had just slammed shut. The room at Antonelli's seated 12. 23 family members had been invited to our house. My mother had already quietly decided weeks ago which 11 of her own family members were nothing more than disposable furniture. I walked out of the pantry and found my husband, Mark, standing near the kitchen island. Mark is a good, hard-working man, but like many men in families with overbearing matriarchs, he came pre-installed with peacekeeping software. He listened to the voicemail, his jaw working tightly, and then uttered the exact, reasonable words I had used myself for 25 years. "It's just one dinner, Dana. We grit our teeth, we go to the restaurant for 2 hours, and we come home. It's her 70th. Do you really want to become the villain in the family story on her big night?" He wasn't wrong according to the old rules. He was quoting the family manual accurately. But then, Mark walked past the dining table toward the sink to grab a glass of water, and he stopped dead in his tracks. Lily was sitting at the kitchen counter in her sweatpants, her new party dress laid out neatly on her bed upstairs. And she wasn't crying. Crying would have been easier to bear. Instead, she was meticulously wrapping 6 large serving dishes into storage containers, using blue painter's tape and a Sharpie to label them in her careful handwriting. Chicken and dumplings, Aunt Janet. Mac and cheese, freeze half. 9 hours of love, neatly folded up and put away like out-of-season clothing. Mark stood holding his water glass, watching his 17-year-old daughter silently file her own party into the refrigerator. I watched 15 years of keep the peace drain completely out of my husband, through the floorboards. He set his glass down, turned to me, and asked very quietly, "What are you going to do?" At precisely 4:40, my phone buzzed with one final message from my mother. Sensing that her middle child had not yet fallen into line, Rose escalated from policy to terms. "Since you haven't confirmed, I expect you and Mark at Antonelli's at 7 p.m. alone. This is not up for debate. If you choose to sulk at home instead, don't bother coming to Thanksgiving. And don't expect me to protect you when the family asks why my own daughter boycotted my 70th birthday. They will draw their own obvious conclusions." I read it twice. It was a classic hostage letter. Come alone, your daughter is the ransom. Don't bother with the holidays. Your family connection is the ransom. We will tell everyone you're crazy. Your reputation is the ransom. For 25 years, I had paid every single one of those emotional ransoms in full and called it being the bigger person. I looked at the stove holding 6 warm dishes. I looked at the table set for 23. I looked up at the ceiling toward my daughter's room. I looked at the gold-bordered place card sitting at the head of the table, turned it over, and saw the faint pencil note Lily had written on the back weeks ago. "Happy 70th, from your sous chef." That was the moment I officially retired from being my mother's catering staff. I walked down the stairs, entered the kitchen, and found my daughter sitting quietly on her grandmother's age. I treated her as an equal, 2 kitchen professionals standing at the pass before a major service. "Here is what I'm thinking, Lily," I said, keeping my voice steady. "We open our doors tonight at 6 o'clock, exactly as planned. We invite the entire family, everyone, especially the cousins with young kids. My mother will take it as an act of declaration. Some people might still go to the restaurant. It might end up being just 4 of us eating 6 massive dishes. And on Monday, the phone calls from my mother will be brutal. If we do this, you are not a kid whose party got rescued. You are the executive chef. It's your food on the line, so it's your call." Lily paused her cooking video, looked at me, and for the first time since 4:15, the flat, defeated dullness vanished from her face. Something fierce woke up underneath. "If it's 4 people, Mom," she said softly, "I'm still plating it in courses." Then, a beat later, "You'd really do that to Grandma?" I gave her the truest answer of my life. "Not to Grandma, baby. For you." Before broadcasting my decision to the extended family, I sat at the kitchen counter and wrote 3 different drafts of a response. The first draft was a fierce prosecution, a detailed list of dates and receipts detailing 25 years of my mother's favoritism and how she had sidelined my daughter. I deleted it because a prosecution is just another form of begging for validation at her table. The second draft was sarcastic and biting, but I deleted it because sarcasm is my mother's native language, and I was done being fluent in her. The third draft was an emotional essay, full of long-winded explanations and defensive apologies, me kneeling one last time between my mother's ego and the truth. I deleted it slowest of all, because that draft represented the passive woman I had been for 25 years. I finally realized that any message written in her currency, blame, status, or spin, kept me trapped in her ranking system. The only message that actually set us free was one with no argument in it at all. An invitation doesn't argue. An invitation simply opens a door and stands there, warm with the porch light on. At 5 o'clock sharp, I sent my mother one final private text to give her the courtesy of hearing the door open before the rest of the family did. "Mom, I love you, and happy birthday. I am not coming to Antonelli's without Lily. I won't leave my daughter home like a coat you don't want to wear. Dinner is still at our house at 6 p.m. Everything Lily cooked for you is on the table, and the chair at the head of the table has your name on it in gold. It will be there at 6, and it will still be yours if you walk in at 8. I hope you come. Either way, I am done choosing between my mother and my daughter. I choose the table where both of you fit. I watched the screen as 3 typing dots appeared, paused, appeared again as she drafted and recalibrated, and then abruptly vanished. In their place, a single gray status appeared. Read at 5:03 p.m. No reply. She was choosing the room that seated 12. At 5:07 p.m., I posted my message to the family group chat directly under my mother's restaurant announcement. I attached 2 photographs, one of our dining room fully dressed with 23 place cards catching the golden evening light, and a close-up of the piping hot peach cobbler. The caption was simple, warm, and entirely devoid of hostility. Dinner is still at 6 p.m. at our house, exactly as planned. Everything on the table was cooked for Grandma by Lily from your favorite family recipes. Everyone is welcome at my table, kids especially. Meanwhile, over at Antonelli's, my mother's grand plan suffered its first major public embarrassment. When Rose arrived at the restaurant with Sandra and demanded that the floor manager heat up her private tray of homemade cobbler in their commercial kitchen, the general manager politely but firmly refused. Under Michigan Department of Agriculture and FDA food safety codes, commercial establishments are legally prohibited from serving non-inspected, home-cooked food in public dining areas due to strict liability laws. My mother was forced to leave the cobbler in the trunk of her car, robbed of the chance to play the benevolent aristocrat in front of her country club friends. At 5:58 p.m., the doorbell at my house rang. It was my cousin Beth, her husband, and their 3 young children, the youngest already reaching out her arms for a hug. Behind them on the walkway came my cousin Tyler's family, his 6-year-old running ahead while his wife carried the baby carrier like a lantern. "We were always coming here, Dana," Beth said, handing me a bag of dinner rolls. The other invitation didn't include my children, so as far as I'm concerned, it didn't include me. Aunt Janet arrived at 6 sharp, taking her coat off before she even crossed the threshold, instantly ready to run dishes. Then Mrs. Henderson, from my late father's side, arrived with a bottle of sparkling cider for the chef. 14 people filled my home to the walls. The gold-bordered place card at the head of the table sat in front of an empty chair all night, and I never once moved it. But 14 people filled my house with genuine warmth, and my 17-year-old daughter tied her apron back on, stood at the kitchen pass, and ran the service of her life. The atmosphere inside my home that night was defined by an unscripted, radiant warmth that no money at Antonelli's could ever purchase. 14 people crowded around my extended dining table, passing heavy porcelain platters of piping hot chicken and dumplings, crispy mac and cheese, and my late father's favorite green beans. Aunt Janet took her first bite of the dumplings, closed her eyes, and gently fanned her face with her napkin, whispering, "Oh, Frank, she got your mother's seasoning exactly right." My young cousins were elbowing each other for the crusty golden corners of the casserole dish, laughing milk out of their noses, while their parents actually got to sit back, relax, and eat a meal without worrying about toddler tantrums ruining a quiet room. Nobody at my table was treated like disposable furniture. Every seat carried equal weight, and every person belonged. High above the chatter, my 17-year-old daughter stood at the kitchen pass in her stained apron, watching her family feast on the 6 dishes she had poured her soul into. For the first time in 2 days, her shoulders dropped away from her ears. Meanwhile, 3 miles across town, the official party at Antonelli's was unfolding in a very different register. I learned the details secondhand from Aunt Janet, who heard it directly from her friend Dolores, a woman who happened to be celebrating her wedding anniversary at a table near Antonelli's private glass room that evening. In a town the size of Rockford, there is always a Dolores. 9 adults sat in a private dining space designed for 12, arranged under the glare of crystal chandeliers. My mother sat at the head of the long table in her freshly salon-styled curls, flanked by Sandra and 3 wealthy couples from her country club, alongside my brother Paul and his wife. Dolores reported that the room had the sterile acoustic quality of a high-security bank vault. The wine list was extensive, and the prime rib was cooked perfectly, but the conversation was stiff, formal, and punctuated by polite, performative laughter. Dolores noted that my mother checked her cell phone screen discreetly under the tablecloth at least 4 times during the entree, which, for a woman with her fanatical posture regarding phones at the dinner table, was the social equivalent of firing a distress flare into the night sky. At precisely 8:53 p.m., our silent family group chat suddenly surged back to life. Beth posted a photograph of the peach cobbler dish, half demolished, with the caption, "Best dessert in Michigan." A minute later, Tyler uploaded a photo of the real kids' table, a chaotic, joyful scene of children raising their juice boxes in a mid-meal toast. Then Aunt Janet posted a crisp, beautiful shot of the 23 hand-lettered place cards lined up across the table, without a single word of commentary or accusation. It was simply a window thrown open for all 23 family members to see what real hospitality looked like. The response from the 9 people sitting in the private room at Antonelli's was an absolute ringing silence. They couldn't accuse us of boycotting her birthday because we were actively celebrating it with her favorite dishes. They couldn't call us bitter because the photos radiated pure joy. My mother had built her entire authority on controlling the narrative, but a single photograph of 14 smiling relatives eating homemade cobbler rendered her entire ranking system completely powerless. By 10 o'clock, the last guests had hugged us goodbye, promising to bring Tupperware for leftovers the next day. Lily fell asleep upright on the living room couch at 10:40, her apron still half-tied around her waist. Mark gently picked her up and carried her up the stairs, the way he used to when she was 7 years old, her long legs dangling past his elbows. Left alone in the quiet house, I stood at the kitchen sink with my hands submerged in soapy dishwater, scrubbing the last heavy baking sheet. That was when the full weight of the day finally caught up to me. I didn't feel triumph or smug satisfaction. What hit me in the quiet steam of 11 o'clock at night was the memory of my daughter's level, deadpan voice at 4:15. "It's okay, Mom. I'm used to it." I stood there and cried silently into the dishwater, crying for the 17-year-old girl who had trained herself to expect the card table in the den, and crying for the 38-year-old version of myself who had handed her the flashcards to learn that terrible lesson. Aunt Janet had stayed behind to help dry the glassware, as Janet always does. Seeing my shoulders shaking over the sink, she picked up a dish towel and gave me the missing, crucial chapter of my mother's life. "You know, Dana, Rose wasn't born like this," Janet said softly, setting down a wine glass. "In 1980, when Rose was 24 and a brand new bride in the Whitfield family, her mother-in-law sat her down in the kitchen on Thanksgiving Day. Not near the kitchen, honey. Inside it. She told Rose that the dining room table was reserved for real family, and since Rose was only married into the family, she hadn't earned a chair yet. Your mother ate her Thanksgiving dinner standing up at the kitchen counter, alone, listening to them laugh through the wall. And it wasn't just one holiday. She ate in that kitchen until Paul was born, 4 years later. Rose used to say Paul earned her a chair." Janet folded the towel into a neat, furious square. "The Whitfields ranked her from day one, so the moment Rose got a house and a table of her own, she started ranking everyone else. She didn't invent that rule book, Dana. She inherited it. It doesn't excuse what she did to Lily, but that is where the ink came from. I dried my hands, looked out the dark kitchen window, and let that land. My mother's cruelty was just inherited trauma masquerading as tradition. Understanding where the ink came from didn't unwrite the painful sentence she had handed my daughter, but it gave me the ultimate clarity I needed to ensure my branch of the family would never write another line of it again. At 8:40 on Sunday morning, the doorbell rang. Mark had taken Lily to the diner an hour earlier to return the borrowed heavy sheet pans, leaving me alone in the quiet kitchen with a fresh cup of coffee and the remaining wreckage of a wonderful party. Through the frosted glass panel of my front door, I recognized the silhouette immediately. Her posture arrived 10 seconds before her spine did, poised, upright, and immovable. But there was something subtly off about the outline, a stillness that didn't fit her usual cadence. My mother does not wait at doors. She traditionally sweeps through them mid-sentence, assuming every entryway in this family is naturally her domain. This shape simply stood on the porch, rang the chime once, and waited. In her hands, she held a small brown paper bag with both hands, the way someone holds a document in a hospital waiting room. I set my coffee mug down on the counter and deliberately did not rush to answer it. I wasn't making her wait out of petty cruelty or spite. I needed to slow myself down, because the woman who historically sprinted to answer that door was the fixer, the translator, the caterer, always rushing to smooth over the tension before it could cause a scene. That old version of me had retired after a long 25-year shift, and I had given her the morning off. I poured hot water over 2 teacups out of 41 years of ingrained habit, looked at the second cup for a quiet moment, left it on the tray anyway, and walked over to unlatch the lock. When I opened the door, my mother entered the entryway like a seasoned diplomat stepping into a territory that had just voted against her wishes. Her chin was held high, her eyes instantly conducting a rapid inventory of the house. She clocked the dining room immediately. The table was still fully extended, the linens still draped, and marching down the center sat 23 hand-lettered place cards, with her gold-bordered card sitting undisturbed at the head of the empty chair. I watched her see it, and for a split second, something vulnerable crossed her face, before vanishing like a fish under thick ice. She sat down at my kitchen table, accepted the cup of tea, arranged the brown paper bag by her ankles, and launched into her opening line, a sentence she had clearly rehearsed during the drive over. "The family is saying you split us apart, Dana. Janet's photographs made everything 10 times worse, and Sandra's friends saw them online. Everyone is talking. So, here is what we are going to do. You will post a polite message in the group chat today, you're good at those, explaining that it was all just a miscommunication. 2 lovely celebrations, 1 big happy weekend. And then we will simply never speak of this unpleasantness again." I stirred my tea slowly and let the full weight of her proposal land. I marveled at it, truly, the way you marvel at an ancient monument. My mother had lost the actual night, missed her granddaughter's 6-dish feast, lost the family's presents, and yet she arrived at my door before 9 in the morning to negotiate for the only territory she had ever really governed, the story. Not a single word of regret, no interest in what she had missed, just public spin. "Mom," I said softly, keeping my voice in the steady register I use for incorrect order tickets at the diner. "I'm not posting anything. I didn't split the family. I set a table and opened my door. Everyone was invited, especially you. Your name is still sitting at the head of that table in gold ink. People sat where they felt welcomed. That isn't a mix-up. That's just what happened. My mother set her teacup down with the sharp, tiny click that had ended arguments in our household for half a century. But for the first time in my 38 years, the click didn't work. What followed was my mother cycling through her entire emotional arsenal. First came her status as the matriarch. It was my 70th birthday, Dana. You had one job, to be there. I agreed the milestone was important and noted that Lily had felt the exact same way, devoting 9 hours of her life to honor it. Then came the bargain, offered like a royal pardon. Fine, at Christmas, Lily can sit at the main mahogany table. There. Is that what this was all about? Are we finished now? I wanted her to hear how hollow that offer was. Even now, she could only comprehend the heartbreak as a seating error, solvable by granting a promotional chair from the throne. A decade ago, I would have accepted that deal, driven home glowing, and called it a major family breakthrough. I simply declined it quietly, the way you decline a promotional flyer for a store you no longer shop at. My mother stared at me across her cooling tea like a grandmaster watching an opponent stand up mid-game and walk out of the tournament. That was when her rigid posture finally cracked. Her shoulders dropped half an inch. Her voice lost its polished country club veneer, and she asked her first genuine question in 25 years. Then what do you want from me, Dana? What am I supposed to do? I set my cup down and gave her the exact price, the non-negotiable toll required for her to have a future with my branch of the family. You don't owe me anything, Mom. We're square. I got everything I needed at 6 o'clock last night. The person you owe is Lily. She is sitting in the backyard right now on the steps. You are going to walk out there, sit down, and tell your granddaughter what her cooking meant to you. You'll know the conversation went well if she shows you the menu she spent 2 weeks designing. That is the entire cost of this table. My mother looked toward the back patio door as if staring across an open battlefield. Then she picked up her brown paper bag, stood up, and opened the glass door. I stayed near the kitchen window, watching from a distance. My mother crossed the wooden deck with uncharacteristic hesitation, visibly lost in a backyard where her authority carried no weight. Lily looked up from her book, didn't stand up, and didn't rush to rescue her grandmother either. My daughter was officially done saving adults from their own choices. Then, in her tailored slacks and day-old salon curls, my mother lowered herself down onto the cold concrete step directly beside my daughter. She didn't take the patio chair 2 feet away. She sat right on the step, opened the brown paper bag, and pulled out a Tupperware container I recognized instantly. It was a single serving of peach cobbler that Aunt Janet had quietly dropped off on Rose's front porch late last night, with a handwritten note reading, "You should at least taste it." My mother pulled her own silver fork from her purse. She had come armed for a ceremony. Through the glass, I watched her speak, watched Lily offer a brief, one-syllable response, and then watched my mother eat cold peach cobbler on a concrete step. She ate the entire portion, slowly, savoring the dessert her granddaughter had reconstructed from 4 test batches of her dead grandmother's memory. When she finished, Lily went inside, retrieved a piece of heavy cardstock, and handed her the handwritten menu. I watched my mother trace every single line of calligraphy with her finger, reading it the way people read hymnals. They sat together on that step for 10 quiet minutes, an empress without a court and a line cook without an apron, eating from the same pan of family history. One of them saying thank you, approximately 50 years late, and the 17-year-old mercifully letting it count. On her way out the door that Sunday morning, my mother paused near the front hallway, her posture back to its usual rigid alignment. She adjusted a framed family photograph on the wall that was already perfectly straight, kept her back partially turned toward me, and uttered her final concession speech. The seasoning in the chicken and dumplings. A heavy, geological pause hung in the air before she added, "She gets that from my grandmother." Nobody else in this family ever got it right. Then she stepped out onto the porch, leading with her spine into the bright Sunday light. That was the entire apology, 1 inch of ground delivered sideways about poultry seasoning. But having been fluent in my mother's emotional shorthand for 38 years, I knew the translation. That single inch represented the unconditional surrender of her entire empire. The structural fallout across the extended family unfolded over the next week in predictable frequencies. My brother Paul texted me privately, "I can't believe you actually pulled it off." His message managed to be 50% accusation and 50% genuine awe, which for Paul was the equivalent of a standing ovation. 2 of the country club relatives went icy cold toward me for a season, and I let them. Frost thaws or it doesn't, and my house was warm either way. Sandra sent my mother an elaborate fruit basket and reportedly referred to the entire incident at Bridge as that unfortunate scheduling overlap, which in country club dialect is how fading empires file their defeats. Meanwhile, the family group chat, the exact space where my 17-year-old daughter had watched her gift get canceled with an exclamation point, quietly transformed. On Thursday afternoon, Beth posted deadpan, "So when is the next dinner at Dana's house?" asking for 11 hungry people. 6 weeks have passed since that Saturday, and a new normal has taken deep root in our lives. On the first Sunday of every month, my dining table is extended to its maximum length. The linens are pressed, and a fresh set of hand-lettered place cards lines the center. Lily's table has become an official family institution. Lily plans the menu, the young cousins receive cards drawn with soccer balls and dinosaurs, and Aunt Janet arrives with her coat half off, instantly ready to run service. There's no head of the table at Lily's gatherings. She seats people strictly based on where the conversation flows best, a philosophy of democratic hospitality she designed herself, and one I fully intend to adopt at the diner. Beth's family hasn't missed a single Sunday, and Tyler's youngest baby regularly eats strained peaches off our finest silver spoons. My mother attended the very first Sunday dinner. She walked in quietly, sat down right in the middle of the table, and found a place card that read simply Grandma in gold-bordered calligraphy, written in the exact same ink as everyone else's. I watched her read that card, touch the foil border, and then quietly pocket it when she thought no one was paying attention. She missed the second Sunday due to a prior country club commitment, and the most miraculous thing happened. Nobody panicked. Nobody gossiped, and nobody grieved. The chicken and dumplings were served, the cobbler came out hot at 6:15, and the room was full of laughter. My mother is who she is, but her social rank no longer dictates the weather inside my home. She can come sit in the warmth as an equal, or she can miss it. Either way, the table remains set. As for Lily, she recently submitted her early decision application to a top culinary school for the upcoming fall semester. Her application essay opened with a detailed account of cooking a birthday feast for 14 people on a night when the world tried to cancel her reservations. She let me read the final draft on the kitchen counter last week, and I had to hold the pages away from my face to keep my tears from smudging the ink. Midway through our most recent Sunday dinner, while the cousins were happily fighting over the crusty corners of the macaroni dish, my daughter leaned against my shoulder at the kitchen pass and whispered, I'm still not used to this yet, Mom. I looked out at the loud, unranked, gravy-stained table she had built from scratch, put my arm around her, and gave her the single greatest inheritance I possess. Good, baby, I said softly. Don't ever be